I think the final chapter hit in a satisfying way for ending the Jujutsu Sorcerer groups. Like, I think the epilogue that we got with all of the remaining characters that are survived, the final mission with Yuji, Megumi, and Nobara, I think it was great. I think it was a great way to finish their stories, and I think Sukuna meeting with Mahito in the end was also interesting as well. You know what was missing? And I came to this epiphany only a little bit before stream, after I was thinking about this, and I think I figured out what's missing is Kenjaku. So I've realized that any potential gripe that I could have for Jujutsu Kaisen all leads back to Kenjaku. Every unanswered question, every unsatisfied or empty plot point, or any and that resolution that we're missing. We didn't need the merger, right? I've come to the conclusion that yes, we definitely did not need the merger. We needed Kenjaku and resolution when it came to Kenjaku, and I think this has further increased my my need. It proved to me, I was talking about this with Tiberius today, this was Kenny's story, everyone else was just living in it, Sukuna was high-key a pawn in his plan. Yeah, exactly. This is what happens when the mastermind villain dies before the strongest villain. Yeah, that's what I was trying to say, is it proved to me ultimately that I was kind of right to assume that Kenjaku really was the main villain all along, right? Kenjaku was the main villain, not Sukuna. Sukuna doesn't move the plot along, and I think we can see this now. Sukuna is a great character. Sukuna's ending was great. Sukuna's dynamic with Yuji needed to be solved at the end of the series, yes. But he wasn't the one that was driving the main force of the story. Kenjaku was the one that was friends with Tengen. Kenjaku was the one that started the culling game. Kenjaku was the one that had the major threat of the merger. Yes, Sukuna was the person that we had the final battle with, but all of the empty holes and all of the unsatisfied plot points at the end of Jujutsu Kaisen lead back to Kenjaku. Kenjaku's ending, Kenjaku could have died before Sukuna. Kenjaku didn't have to be the final big bad. Kenjaku didn't have to be the last fight. Sukuna could have been the last fight. Kenjaku's ending was so... There was what happened from that. Kenjaku died to Takaba and Yuta, gave the merger to Sukuna to inherit Sukuna's will, or inherit Kenjaku's will, and that was it. The man that spent thousands of years to create this merger, at the very last second said, yeah, you know what, I died, I'm not going to be able to see my merger, but it is what it is. There's a reason why when Kenjaku died, I made like a 20-minute video dissecting all of the different ways that Kenjaku could not only revive, but Kenjaku could still achieve his plan, and why Kenjaku seems so, oh, blah, 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 I'm not worried about this at all. Like, it blows my mind to this day that's the ending that we got for Kenjaku, right? And that's really what it was. It feels very out of character that Kenny had nothing set up in case of his death at the hands of the sorcerers. I mean, we definitely don't need every question answered, but think about it. Like, people are upset because we never really found out what Yuji's origin had to do with the Eye of the Storm of Curses. Why was Yuji so important to curses reigning rampant? Why did Kenjaku know Jin Itadori had Sukuna's twin soul? What happened to Jin Itadori and Kaori Itadori? What happened to Yuji's parents? Not that Yuji needs to know, but fuck it, I think that's kind of important. I want to know why Kenjaku created Yuji. What did Kenjaku create Yuji for? Just so he could have a vessel for Sukuna, a potential vessel for Sukuna? There's so many things in regards to Yuji and Kenjaku that were left kind of on the cutting room floor. Tengen and Kenjaku's relationship, their history, and everything that went on in the Heian era. We did not need a Heian era flashback, but I think there needed to be a little bit more light shed on that relationship between Kenjaku and Tengen. That relationship between Sukuna. How is Sukuna involved in Tengen and Kenjaku? So many things and threads left undone in that area. You've got Kenjaku and the merger, which again, we didn't need to see the merger, but a character, a mastermind, who was pulling everything behind the strings. Imagine if we never learned what happened to Naruto's parents. That's kind of a pretty good analogy. I don't think the ending was terrible, right? I think the overall ending was fine. I think the threads that are left unanswered is what leaves us unsatisfied, right? I think this ending could have played out the exact same, but Kenjaku needed more. Give a couple extra pages to Sukuna and Yuji's final moments, that would have been nice as well, but ultimately I think my issue is so many threads go left undone and they all tie together to Kenjaku. Sukuna and Mahito conversation was the best part of the epilogue. 110%. I completely agree with that. Mahito coming back just for a short cameo at the end satisfied so much in my soul. I love it. Even though it wasn't Yuji seeing a newly born Mahito killing him, I think the fact that we did get a final moment with Mahito was just absolutely amazing. Like, ultimately, the final chapter is a nice final chapter. Like, a lot of the... I like 270, I like 269, I liked all of the ending, like the 3 epilogue chapters I really, really liked. I thought they all did a good job. It feels like Sukuna cycle, nice epilogue. Like, it's like that, we jumped around to really get to that ending, where it ends up leaving us feeling unsatisfied because it is unsatisfying. There's things that didn't get, like Gege did not wrap it with a nice bow. He did not put a nice bow on top of everything. There are definitely holes in the road here. Feels weird that in the same chapter or same arc we discover Yuji and Choso are sons to the new twist villains. The same arc Yuji talks to Kenny for the first and last time. Literally true. Yuji doesn't have one interaction with Kenjaku besides that one moment in the Shibuya incident, which I feel is underutilized entirely. I definitely feel like Yuji and Kenjaku needed to meet at least once more and have a final discussion, even if Yuji didn't want to hear it. The Yuta Gojo stuff was meaningless. I think we can definitely say that now. Yuta coming back in Gojo's body was definitely unnecessary and definitely just stupid. There was literally no point to that whatsoever. We skipped right by that. It gave subtle indication for Yuta being the next coming Satoru Gojo, Yuta being the only person that was being willing to become the monster. Although I think that kind of isn't even really what Gojo wanted, right? Yuta ends up being the failed prodigy at the end of everything, because Gojo ends up entrusting his future to Yuji of all people, not Yuta, which I thought was interesting, right? I think Yuta choosing to become Gojo not working does make sense literary wise. Like, I'm okay with it. Do I think it was necessary, a necessary thread? No, I think Yuta has fine characterization on his own. And maybe it is just done to prop up more Yuji as the prodigal son, the actual successor of Gojo, as opposed to Yuta, because Yuji was the one that was able to look past Gojo's philosophy and create his own, that own philosophy, what that was able to actually beat Sukuna. Because again, if you think about it, so I just talked myself into liking this. I actually just talked myself into liking it. Thank you for the 5 gifted, Loud. Gojo didn't want a replacement. He wanted his students to be better and different. Exactly. So I think ultimately you can see why the Yuta to Gojo change amounted to nothing. Just recreating the monster, simply recreating Gojo and becoming Gojo, the new Satoru Gojo wasn't enough to beat Sukuna. Satoru Gojo wasn't enough to beat Sukuna in the first place, so Yuta becoming the next Satoru Gojo doesn't mean anything. Whereas Yuji, instead of becoming the next Satoru Gojo, Yuji becomes his own fully realized version of Itadori Yuji, which ends up being the power that beats Sukuna in the end, as opposed to just retreading and retracing Gojo's steps. I wouldn't say the series was rushed. I would say that it needed more time to be fleshed out, but I don't think Gege rushed. I think Gege left too much unanswered, would be my answer to that. I wouldn't call Jujutsu Kaisen's ending rushed. I would call it as Gege thinking he closed the book and finished all of and gave us all the answers, but he really didn't. Like, the ending in and of itself works fine. I think the ending is great. I think the ending works fine. It's, again, my biggest problems are completely and wholeheartedly Kenjaku's integration into the story not being that Kenjaku's entire plot thread was dropped. Kenjaku's entire plot thread was dropped. I think I feel more comfortable saying that. Like, if you want to say that was Gege rushing the story, I wouldn't blame you. Gege messed up when he had 2 major villains. No, he could pull off 2 major villains. The problem is he gave up on one of them. Kenjaku, like, the fact that, like, you were able to say that, like, Yuta sneak attacked Kenjaku, decapitated him, and then easily handled the cursed spirit storm that came out of him from Rika, just doesn't sit right with me. And I feel like, again, all of my problems fall to Kenjaku's lap. It's all him. Like, it seems like everything that had to do with Kenjaku, Gege said, all right, not doing that. We're finishing strong on the Sukuna side of things. I'm done integrating Kenjaku into my story, and that was the end of everything, which I think is one of the biggest problems you could ever possibly have. Because again, and I've said it and I've been clowned on for saying it. I've had plenty of people tell me that I'm wrong and saying that Kenjaku is the villain that moves the plot. Sukuna does not move the plot. Sukuna has dynamics with characters, but the plot and narrative of Jujutsu Kaisen does not revolve around Sukuna. Sukuna is a force of nature, whereas Kenjaku was the villain that pulled the narrative along. And I feel like Kenjaku getting tossed out of the story early on and then just focusing on the Sukuna side gives us a satisfying conclusion to the characters, but not a satisfying conclusion to the story. And that's what it is. That's really what it is. The characters got a good ending. The story did not get a good ending. And I feel like that can all come down to Gege's main issue that I think if any of you guys have been here for the data book streams, you probably know what I'm talking about. If you were here for the JJK data book streams, you know one thing that we learned about Gege was that Gege lets his characters get the best of him, which, in my honest opinion, is a great way to write a story. When your characters get away from you, when you've created when you've created great characters, so great in fact that they are able to literally move on their own, right? Like the character of Yuji, the character of Higuruma, like these characters had so much depth and layer added to them that Gege could say, okay, instead of pin plotting where his story would go, Gege says, okay, Higuruma does this. This is how Higuruma responds to the things that are happening, which is, again, a great way to do a character-driven story. That's why I loved Game of Thrones. That's why I loved Frieren. Character-driven stories that these characters literally, they are given lives of their own and they're able to exist outside of the page as like legitimate, real personalities and people. And Gege excels in that so much. But what happens, and what Gege even admits to happening in interviews, is Gege will let his characters go too far and not let his story catch up. That is the issue. He's even admitted it multiple times where he lets his characters get the better of themselves, and then he'll go 10 chapters letting his characters write the story for him. By the time it's over, he goes, oh shit, I was supposed to do this, this, and this narrative didn't even get finished. And that is the issue. That is the problem, is Gege let his characters get the better of him, thinking that his characters would plot this all out and put it together, and then they killed Kenjaku, and then by the time that Sukuna ended, and by the time he had to end the story was already 50 chapters behind where we were. The story of Jujutsu Kaisen ended when Kenjaku got his head lopped off, and we got into the final fight with Sukuna. At that point, Jujutsu Kaisen was over. Nothing new was introduced, no new plot points were finalized, nothing. At that point, Jujutsu Kaisen ended. Any thoughts on no one mentioning that the whole world knows about cursed energy and Japan's barrier is about to fall? Again, dropped plot points, leading all back to Kenjaku. All of those plot points came back to Kenjaku, Tengen, and everything. Kenjaku's entire plot point, his entire character, everything that Kenjaku had to do with the story was taken out. Either Gege said, this is too much and it's not going to fit my timeline, instead of working into Kenjaku into everything into my timeline, I'm just gonna throw this aside, finish Kenjaku, and call it a day. NGW, thank you for being a member for 17 months. Such a long time. God damn, thank you so much. Do you think Gojo's character was assassinated like the rest of the fan base thinks? I personally think he had a good ending. Absolutely not. I think Gojo's character was perfect. I don't think Gojo did anything wrong. I don't think the final chapter or final moment with him did a disservice to his character. I know people are going to say Gojo's character was assassinated, and that's just because they don't understand Gojo. They understand overpowered, funny sensei character. They don't understand Gojo Satoru, the character that Gege wrote, and that's fine. They don't have to. They can enjoy the story however they want. If they don't want to understand the deeper narrative behind Gojo's character, that's okay. But I think it's very apparent that if again, like I said, if anything got done correctly, it's Gege's characters. It's literally Gege's characters that got done justice here. Scarlet, thank you for the 20. Kenjaku is in a way similar to Madara. They know most of how the world they live in works. Madara was disposed of by an alien. Kenjaku was eliminated by one of the strongest and the one he underestimated most back in Shibuya. It makes sense. I think literally, like imagine if, let's say, we got 5 more chapters added to Jujutsu Kaisen, and those 5 chapters were dedicated to Yuta versus Kenjaku. And in Yuta versus Kenjaku, you have Yuta and Kenjaku fighting, but Kenjaku detailing most of the questions that we want in that fight. Kenjaku could have answered why Yuji. Kenjaku could have answered even small little hints to what his relationship to Tengen was. Kenjaku could have given us why Jin and Kaori were focused on. Like, Kenjaku could have given us why he wanted, like, why the culling game, all of these things I feel like could have been done if we at least got more with, but instead Kenjaku's final fight was with Takaba, which again, I like the Takaba fight. I think the Takaba fight is fine. I do not think that should have been Kenjaku's last fight. Only thing I'm really confused by is why was Cursed Energy not abandoned? I mean, they don't really have a choice to abandon Cursed Energy. They can't really get away from Cursed Energy. You know, at this point, they don't have the power to do that. If the merger happened, and or they were able to turn the merger around or something like that, maybe. But unfortunately, Yuki dying also kind of dropped that whole plot thread of the world breaking away from Cursed Energy and Kenjaku's opposing viewpoint of the world embracing Cursed Energy. Like, it really was almost like, I guess we'll never know what the Trident does. Yeah, not ever seeing Heighten is definitely a missed opportunity as well. I can't believe he didn't take the opportunity. I really thought we were going to see Heighten when Sukuna lost his domain expansion and literally had no choice, but nope, instead Gege just gave us, you know, more domain expansion. Chanado, thank you for the 20. Let's be honest, JJK is something Gege barely wanted to write. Add on all the insane entitlement of the Gojo fans. I'd be so done too. Yeah, we were kind of talking about it. It just seems like he kind of just dropped Kenjaku as a plot thread. I think that's my major problem. I think Gege gave all of his characters justice, except Kenjaku. I think Sukuna needed more time. Of course, he needed more pages, but I think Kenjaku's entire plot line was just dropped. Yuji's origin, the culling game and the merger, Tengen and all of the relationships with that in the Heian era just dropped to the wayside. In my opinion, Sukuna was not the most interesting villain. It was definitely Kenjaku for me. Gege ended up choosing the less intriguing villain, in my opinion, to finish the story with, and that's overall my final thoughts on that. Thank you for the dono, by the way, Chanadol. Thank you so much. Gege definitely was ready to finish, and it seems like in the want to finish, he just straight up just dropped Kenjaku as a plot line, because if he didn't drop Kenjaku as a plot line, there would have been so much more to discuss. Like, even if, again, like I said, even if we got like a final fight with Yuji and Kenjaku, 3-4 chapters of Kenjaku just better explaining the plot threads that we needed, I feel like we could have saved the show. And then we didn't have to change anything. Like I said, maybe give Sukuna a little bit longer of a death scene with Yuji. But other than that, I mean, that's ultimately my biggest gripe with everything. I think JJK was Sukuna's story all along. You can't convince me otherwise. Well, I think that's my gripe, is Kenjaku literally held all of the important plot threads that everyone feels unsatisfied about in his character. Yuji's origin, the merger, Tengen, all of that was tying back to Kenjaku. Like, Sukuna realistically didn't have much to do with the plot besides finish off with Yuji's character. Like, JSARP said it best, which was, it's insane that Yuji only had one interaction with Kenjaku throughout the entire story. I'm not too worried about the unanswered questions because I think a lot of that can be resolved in the anime or light novels or video games or whatever. That's unsatisfying to me. That's unsatisfying to me, in my honest opinion. I think writers should finish their stories in their stories and not rely on extra additional content to fill in their plot threads. That's a very terrible way of writing your story if that's the case. And hey, everyone's different. Don't get me wrong. Everyone is indeed different. Feel free to do what you want, but like, I hate the fact that, like, now we have oh, I'll just fix it in the DLC. Get the hell out of here. Just stop, you know? Write a full-fledged story from the beginning. Gege came out already saying he hated writing JJK. Everything puts off things they hate. No, Gege never said that he hates writing JJK. This narrative needs to die immediately. Gege never said that he hates writing JJK. And if he did, I would love for you to show me proof of that, please. I don't know where this narrative began with Gege hates Gojo, which even then is like an out of context statement as well. So and it's constantly used to excuse Gege's writing decisions. But why would Gege write a story that he doesn't like? We got to generally think about that for a minute. Why would we write stories that we don't like? We probably wouldn't. What about when AOT updated its ending then? The AOT updating its ending, I feel like, is an entirely different concept, because AOT updated its ending because the people that were reading it were too stupid to figure out what the ending meant. So Isayama had to then add even more context to his ending so people didn't misinterpret it, and people still weren't able to figure it out. I mean, I honestly wouldn't even, I don't even think that's necessary. I think the people that are going to misunderstand Attack on Titan, we're always going to misunderstand Attack on Titan, but I think the anime ending did a good job of just adding more context and making Isayama's intentions with the story much more clear. Again, I like I said, I wouldn't really call that an updated, like him changing his story. Or adding in additional content. I would call that him adding context for people that were not able to figure it out the first time around. Crimson Titan, I know you're saying that to trigger me. I'm not falling for it. You can't get me with that one. Too easy. The Sukuna face. See, you guys can't get me anymore, especially you guys that have been here long enough, because I know you've been here. I know you've been here long enough to know my opinions on these things. And I know you just want to see me go on a 5-hour Attack on Titan rant, and don't think I won't. Loud thing for the 10. Gege said he bit off more than he could chew with the military plotline, but he said he was hiring help for it. Maybe a kidnapped sorcerer rescue one-shot. I cope. Yeah, he definitely did bite off more than he could chew with the military plotline, and then, as we see, just dropped it. I think that's the issue with what is just with Gege. He writes himself. I think we can say now so I don't mean this in a way that in most ways that people will tell you that this means, right? A lot of people that say Gege wrote himself into a corner will probably reference that in a sense of Gege wrote himself into a corner with making Sukuna too stronger. Gege wrote himself into a corner by killing Gojo. But that's not how I'm going to use this. Gege writes himself into corners by writing stories that are too extravagant for what he knows, for what he's able to pull off. The military plotline. Yuki and Kenjaku's dynamic of cursed energy being extinguished or not extinguished. Kenjaku and Tengen's Heian era. All of this stuff is just, it was too much for him. And he said, all right, I'm just gonna leave it be then. I'm just gonna not fix it. It's like, no, you can't just introduce this to your story and then just retcon it. Please no. All the unfinished plotlines, I feel like the military plotline would be the most interesting to continue on with its own. Yeah, I definitely agree. The military plotline had a lot of success, not even just now, but in the future. The fact that they're gonna have to, go and rescue the sorcerers that were kidnapped? Insane. Was Yoro kidnapped by the military? Is that why we didn't see her ending? That would have been nice to see Yoro Takako's ending. Gege literally forgot about Yoro. JWP, thank you for the 5. If Gege actually followed through on the plot points, the story would have been like twice as long, which shows how many plot points were finished. Yeah, I completely agree. Diamond, thank you for the 10. I also think that JJK's ending follows the very stereotypical anime ending of the status quo not changing that much in the long run. In fact, it gets worse when you consider Tengen's barriers are gone. Yeah, again, the story isn't resolved. the story itself is not resolved. The characters all got endings. The story did not.